This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Baruchim Abayim, welcome everyone to a special edition of All Parsha on Parshas Toldos, the Baal Haturim on Parshas Toldos. This week, we're going to examine the last Baal Haturim on Parshas Chayei that speaks about the juxtaposition of the end of Chayei with the beginning of Toldos. The end of Chayei reads, Al Pnei Chol Echav Nafal. It's speaking about the various families of Ishmael. Upon the face of all his brothers, he dwelled. Rashi says Nafal means Shachan. Says the Baal Haturim, Al Pnei Chol Echav Nafal, V'samich le, juxtaposed to Al Pnei Chol Echav Nafal, juxtaposed to the fall of Ishmael, is V'yela Toldos Yitzchak. Loimar lecha, to teach, Kishayipol Yishmael ba'achros hayamim. When Yishmael falls in the end of days, as Yitzmach ben David. Then Ben David will flourish, Shehu mi Toldos Yitzchak, who is from the descendants of Yitzchak. So the Baal Haturim is predicting, prophesying, that upon the fall of Yishmael in the end of days, then Mashiach ben David will arise, will flourish, and the connection between Ben David and Yitzchak is, he is from the progeny of Yitzchak. Now the first question is, why is Mashiach any more connected to Yitzchak than Abraham, or Yaakov, or Moshe? And presumably it's because Yitzchak is specifically connected to the end of days. The Gemara tells us that in the end of days, Yitzchak will be the one who will bail out the Jewish people. Abraham and Yaakov will not have an argument to defend us. Yitzchak will argue with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He'll say, Palgi alai, Palgi alecha. You, Rebbeinu Hashem, you bear half their sin, I'll bear half of their sin. So Yitzchak will bail us out in the end of days. The oisios of Yitzchak is Kates Chai, alive in the end, because Yitzchak already experienced Tchias HaMesim, so Yitzchak's whole existence is an existence of the Achros Hayamim. But this comment of the Baal Haturim is a very significant comment historically, because Baal Haturim is telling us that the last Malchus to stand seems to be Malchus Yishmael, and when they fall, then Mashiach ben David will flourish. Now, is Yishmael really a power? Is he one of the main superpowers of the world? We know Chazal tell us on many occasions that they're Daled Malchios, and typically the Daled Malchios are understood to be Bavel, Yavan, Paras, and Edom. And the Medrash Rabbah in many places says the fourth and final Malchus will be Golos Edom. Interestingly, the Ibn Ezra throughout Tanakh lists Yishmael as the fourth Malchus, and Roimi, Edom, is part of Yavan. But that is not the tradition of Chazal, and that is not what Chazal say in the Medrash Rabbah. And therefore, according to the Medrash, that the four Malchios are Bavel, Paras, Yavan, and Roimi, Edom, we would ask, well, what happened to Yishmael? Isn't Yishmael considered a world superpower? Isn't it a Malchus Takifa? Isn't it a very powerful empire? And this is a question that is addressed by the Maharal in a number of Sfarim, in the Sefer Netzach Yisrael, and in other places. And the Maharal offers the following answer. The Maharal tells us that Yishmael and Paras are one and the same. The Maharal says that the definition of a Malchus is not a ethnicity, but it's really a behavior type. And since we know the characteristics of behavior of Paras is they wage wars and they build bridges, this is a accurate description of Golos Yishmael, and therefore, says Maharal, the reason why Yishmael is not listed as one of the Malchios, says the Maharal in the Netzach Yisrael, Parak Chaf Aleph, and in Sefer Ner Mitzvah, is because they are Bechlal Paras. Interestingly, this was not the first answer of the Maharal. The Maharal famously offers that the definition of a Malchus is a Ummah, an empire that usurps their power from the Jewish people, and Yishmael never usurped our power. They have their own independent source of power, namely the Tefillah of Abraham Avinu, and therefore they are not considered a Malchus. However, the Maharal prefers his second answer, and that is the answer that we began with, namely, Yishmael is incorporated in Malchus Paras. So, accordingly, Yishmael is one of the 4 Malchios, but it's Malchus number 2. So now the question begs, the Baal Haturim is saying that in the end of days, Yishmael will fall, and that's when Mashiach will flourish. Well, Yishmael is part of Malchus Paras. Will Yishmael continue to remain until the end of days? Now there's a Gemara in Masechta Yuma, which can be explained quite beautifully according to this Maral that we learned. The Gemara in Yuma brings the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan, versus Rav. Rabbi and Rabbi Yochanan say, in the end of days, Rome will fall to Persia, to Paras. Asidin roimi shatipo biad Paras. On the other hand, Rav is of the opinion, Asida Paras shatipo biad roimi. And you could ask a question. That means both opinions, both Rabbi Yochanan, and Rav hold the last 2 empires standing will be Romi and Paras, and the question is who will defeat who? Rabbi and Rabbi Yochanan say that Asidin Roimi Shatipa Biat Paras will be the last one standing, and Rav says no, Rome will be the last one standing. Interestingly, this Gemara in Yuma fits well with the Gemara in the beginning of Masechta Avodah Zarah, that the Gemara says in the beginning of Masechta Avodah Zarah that in the end of days, the nations of the world will come and claim that they deserve reward from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Gemara says the first nation to come and claim their reward will be Bavel. And the first nation that will come to claim their reward, is Roimi. And the second nation to come and claim their reward will be Paras. And the Gemara says, why Dafka, these 2 nations, Roimi and Paras? And the Gemara says, because these are the most chashuv nations. Ask the Gemara, what makes them chashuv? The Gemara says, Mishum dahanach mashchi b'malchusayu ad asi Mashiach. Roimi and Paras will continue to exist until Mashiach comes. And that's consistent with what the Gemara in Yuma says, that the last 2 nations standing will be Roimi and Paras. The only thing is, there's a machlokes, who will be the last one standing? Do we say like Rabbi and Rabbi Yochanan, Roimi, Asida Roimi Shatipo Biad Paras? Or do we say like Rav, Asida Paras Shatipo Biad Roimi? But you could ask a question. Really, are the last 2 nations that will stand Rome and Persia? Rome, I understand. We know the Western world are considered the spiritual heirs of the Roman Empire. But the Persian Empire, they're long gone. They're long decimated. And even if you think it's Iran today is not connected in any way to the ancient Persian Empire. They're not related to them. They don't stem from them. They are actually originally from more Asian than from Persia. And in that case, what does the Gemara mean? That the last 2 nations standing will be Rome and Paras. Paras is long fallen. But according to the Maral, we understand very clearly, Persia also includes and incorporates Yishmael. And therefore the Gemara is saying in the end of days, there'll be 2 empires standing. The Western world, Roimi, and Yishmael. And who will be the last nation standing? That's a machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan. They say the last nation standing will be Yishmael. And Rav says the last nation standing will be Edom. And that's quite a frightening machlokes. And especially frightening is the opinion of Rabbi and Rabbi Yochanan, that Yishmael will be the last world empire standing before the coming of Mashiach. Comes the Baal Haturim, and the Baal Haturim seems to be saying that he's following the view of Rabbi and Rabbi Yochanan, namely that the last nation standing will be Yishmael. Interestingly, if you look in Toldos and Avodah Zarah, Toldos and Avodah Zarah takes the opinion of Rav, Toldos and Avodah Zarah Gimel Amud Beis, that the last nation standing will be Edom and not Yishmael. So there are different views. There's the view of Toldos on Daf Beis Amud Beis in Masechta Avodah Zarah. Toldos goes like the opinion of Rav. The Baal Haturim follows the view of Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi, that Yishmael will be the last nation standing. Very interestingly, if you look in the Yalkut Shemaini, in the Medrash Shochar Tov, the Yalkut Shemaini says on the parak of Tehillim, parak Vav, Pasuk Aleph, Lam Natzech, Benaginos al Hashmines, the Yalkut says, the Medrash Shochar Tov says that even though there are 4 golosim, there are 4 that are 8. Each golos is double, is two-parted. Bavel, Kazdi, Paras, Madai, Yavan, Maikdan, says the Medrash Shochar Tov, and the last 2 are Yishmael and Edom. The Edom he Hashminas. So the Medrash Shochar Tov seems to be saying that the last Golos is two-parted, and the one that will be last is Edom. This is in accordance with the Shita of Rav, which Tosfos follows. On the other hand, if you look in Rashi, in Zechariah, where Rashi quotes this Medrash, Rashi says at the end of Parakeh that the 4 Golosim are double, Bavel Kazdi, Madai Paras, Antiochas Maikdan, Edom Yishmael. So Rashi says, at least according to the order that Rashi says, Edom and then Yishmael. This is the opinion of Rabbi and Rabbi Yochanan, followed by the Baal Haturim. And these are 2 views in the Rishonim, sourced in 2 views in the Gemara and Yuma on Yud Amud Beis. Amazingly, if you look in the Haggadah Shel Pesach of Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Reb Chaim points out that Chad Gadya has 10 characters. You have the Gadya, and that's Klal Yisrael, and you have HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Then you have 8 characters in between. You have the Shunra, the Kalba, the Chutra, the Nura, the Maya, the Tura, the Shoichet, and the Malach HaMaves. And Reb Chaim Kanievsky says these 8 characters correspond to the 8 Golosim. The final 2 being the Shoichet and the Malach HaMaves. Now, let's identify the Shoichet and the Malach HaMaves. We know they're Edom and Yishmael, but who's the Shoichet and who's the Malach HaMaves? I think both Edom and Yishmael are very suitable candidates to be either the Shoichet or the Malach HaMaves. Now, according to Rav, that the last candidate standing, that the last nation standing is Edom, followed by Tosfos. According to them, the Malach HaMaves would be Edom. And interestingly, the Nazis who are from Edom, they were definitely fit the bill of being called the Malach HaMaves. In fact, one of the well-known Nazis was called the Angel of Death. But on the other hand, Reb Chaim Kanievsky chooses to learn that the Shoichet is Edom. And Edom is certainly suitable to be considered the Shoichet. Says Reb Chaim, and who's the Malach HaMaves, the last and final Golus? Who's the Malach HaMaves? Yishmael. And what source does Reb Chaim quote to demonstrate that Yishmael is the 8th and final Golus? Reb Chaim quotes this Baal Haturim, Shenemar, al pnei chol echav nafal, loimer lecha, kishayipol Yishmael biachris hayomim, az Yitzmach ben David, shehu mitoldos Yitzchak. So you have a machlokes Rav versus Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi. Rav says the last nation standing is Edom. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi say it's Yishmael, according to the Maharal. Tosfos follows Shita of Rav. The Yalkut, the Medrash Shochar Tov follows the Shita of Rav. Yishmael Edom. On the other hand, Rashi and Zechariah follows the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi. That's why Rashi says Edom Yishmael. The Baal Haturim follows the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi. So the Baal Haturim says when Yishmael falls, Ben David will be Yitzmach. Comes the, so to speak, Poisek Achroin perhaps, in Reb Chaim Kanievsky, and he learns in his Parsha on the Haggadah that first it will be Edom, and then it will be Yishmael. May we see very soon the downfall of Yishmael, al pnei chol echav nafal, and may we then be zocheh to see ve'ela Toldos Yitzchak ben Abraham, the tzmicha of Mashiach ben David b'mher v'yameinu. Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.